Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is my favorite of the franchise and one of the most concise examinations of the nature of law, government, and arguably human societies in general ever put to screen. Third in George Miller's Mad Max series, it covers the most conceptual ground. We start with Max riding across the barren wastes on his camel-drawn junk wagon. We don't know how long it's been since the Road Warrior, but as we'll see, his hair has become quite long, and going by my own time from clean cut to metalhead, we're looking at a couple years at least. He gets knocked from his ride by a father and son team of bandits flying over in a Transavia air truck, which is one of the ugliest aircraft ever built, and I've wanted one since I first laid eyes on the hideous little beast. Fortunately for Max, he has a helpful monkey companion that pushes some essential items out of the back of the wagon, allowing him to follow them to Bartertown. Here's where Thunderdome starts to get into some meaty topics in its own peculiar way. Bartertown, as the name implies, is a trading hub. No one gets in without having something to trade, and the town administration functions as arbitration for barter exchanges. The laws are essentially contract law. It revolves around exchanges of goods, or services. And the latter is where Max catches their attention.
I got skills, I can trade them.
Sorry, the brothel's full.
Bartertown is a state, and it has factions. While nominally run by anti-entity, it's a Mad Max movie and you have to roll with the odd monikers. Bartertown depends on energy, which they get from methane, and
Methane comes from pig shit.
the fetid swine farm is run by Master Blaster, who is actually two people and a rival political force. They need him to run the methane plant, but they want to bring him under control. As the Collector explains,
We want to keep the brain, dump the body.
already at this early stage of rebuilding some kind of civilization, we have a ruling elite using proxies to get around their own laws. But there's another bit of complexity here too. Even though the rules of Thunderdome are simple,
2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
Master Blaster is a corporate entity. Even though the conditions to get a legal fight in Thunderdome are contrived, Max's dispute is with Master, but it's Blaster that he has to fight. Neither of the people behind this fight are actually in that arena. Max fails to follow through once he sees the face of his opponent, and in so doing commits a grave crime in a system based on contracts.
Right or wrong, we had a deal. And the law says, bust the deal, face the wheel.
Bust the deal and face the wheel.
It's worth noting that they still kill Blaster quite publicly, and the people of Bartertown go along with it, so apparently the subterfuge wasn't strictly speaking necessary, though it probably made a few potential traitors realize that dealing with the regime is always a lopsided contract. They can withhold details from you, and you'll be the one charged with violating the terms. You can't trust a government no matter what principle it's based on. Max spins the wheel, and Auntie realizes she doesn't actually have a gulag, so instead they decide Max is worth wasting a horse on, and he's sent out into the desert to die. Cue the obligatory quicksand, and he's found near death by a local tribe of feral kids. There's a lot going on here. They think he's a pilot, known to them only as Captain Walker, returned to lead them home. It's both a messiah prophecy and a case of poor historical documentation. Based on what the oldest of them say, an inscription on a cave wall, and various artifacts they make use of, we can piece together that at some point in the past, an airliner flown by Captain Walker crashed and the survivors made their way to this oasis. The eldest among this tribe were among those survivors, though very young at the time, as evidenced by their hazy recollection of the events and peculiarities in their speech that suggest an early childhood level as their language base. Some of the youngest may have even been born from those first survivors. The adults left, telling them that they were going to find help and would be back. That tribe has a verbal and an artistic record of those events, preserved as an almost religious origin myth, illustrated on their cave wall and explained with the aid of a screen to cinematically frame each event. They talk of a nuclear apocalypse.
It's pox-eclipse, full of pain.
But they have no understanding of why. At best they know only what the people on that plane knew, some of which would have been wrong, and most of that has been forgotten anyway.
We kept it straight. It's all there, ain't it? Everything marked, everything remembered.
Which is echoed with the Mad Max films themselves. Road Warrior and Thunderdome are not sequels in the sense of a continuing narrative. Each film is a fable around an archetypal character. It's the story of the character that matters, and the story of the world changes around them. And it isn't just Max. The character Jedediah is fundamentally the same man as the gyro captain from the Road Warrior. A pilot, a thief, devious and shady, but underneath a decent guy who does what's right in the end. He and Max follow a similar arc in relation to each other in both films, but the versions of them in Thunderdome don't remember their prior iterations from the Road Warrior. And there's no solid history. In Mad Max, the world is just decaying. There's no single catastrophic event. The Road Warrior inserts the idea of a long resource war, riffing on the oil embargo of the period, and whether that fuel shortage is after the events of the first film or wedged in as background to it is uncertain.
Without fuel, they were nothing. They'd built a house of straw. The thundering machine sputtered and stopped.
Whereas Thunderdome, made during the Reagan-era ramping up of Cold War rhetoric, pushes oil shock aside in favor of nuclear war.
What's a little fallout, huh?
It's not presented as though it followed on after those other things, oil shortage leading to war and finally nukes fly. It's a singular world-shattering event.
Do you know who I was? Nobody. Except on the day after. I was still alive. This nobody had a chance to be somebody.
This happened. This pocky-clips happened, and it's all finished. It just isn't there anymore.
And that's important to understanding this young tribe. There are a couple different scenarios implied in the story they tell. Most of it suggests that the people on that flight were a typical cross-section of travelers. They had tickets, there was luggage in the hold, it was a scheduled flight going somewhere when somebody got twitchy with the mini-suns and the whole world changed. Whether from EMP, blast wave winds, or just running out of fuel trying to stay in the air while the world burned, a tube full of average folks crashed and they had to figure out how to survive. However, there's also this.
It were full-on winter, and Mr. Dead chasing 'em all, but one he couldn't catch. That were Captain Walker. He gathers up a gang, takes to the air, and flies the sky.
It suggests that the plane took off after the apocalyptic event, and yet the world they left is remembered as skyscrapers and functioning technology. It's a jumbled history with gaps and uncertainty as to the order of events. In either case, after most of the survivors left, there's a small group of kids left to fend for themselves. We don't know how long ago that was, but it's implied that there's at least one pregnancy at the time.
Mr. Sky Fishing pushes. She's gonna pop any day now.
Later we see Savannah, leader of the leaving faction, with a baby that's presumably hers. Somebody's anyway. They're not just abandoned kids anymore. They've become a wasteland tribe, passing on traditions and a tribal identity. And the arrival of Max causes a cultural and almost religious schism, because they shared a Messiah story. Captain Walker will return and lead us to Never Never Land. But they get mixed signs. Max is sort of a fake Messiah who tears down the story, and some follow his word on the subject, but the wind that lifts their bird totem and the falcon crown up through the valley into the aircraft is seen as a divine omen by others that they must follow the original teaching, if not by plane, then on foot. There's a conflict over it, and the tribe splits. The end credits refer to them as the tribe that left and the tribe that stayed. And this scene where Max and a few volunteers head out into the wasteland to bring the others back is the moment that the tribe irrevocably splits. From here on, we're following the tribe that left, the trekkers, the ones not content to sit around their lagoon and fish. I always wondered about the tribe that stayed. How did they develop? What story did they tell about those that walked off into the wasteland and never came back? And if someday the descendants of the two tribes meet, will they recognize each other as kin? And so this new tribe has left their Eden and come to Bartertown, hub of unbridled commerce where everything is commoditized. The rulers sit in a tower and the workers toil underground in pig shit. They're quickly discovered, leading into the defining characteristic of a Mad Max film, the massive car chase of unlikely vehicles. It's also important to note that these kids have a fundamentally different understanding of the world. Max, Auntie, the Master, they all come from the old world and are rooted in that technological society viewpoint. They don't all understand how everything works, but they all know what these various machines do. The kids here don't. Whether it's airliners needing to catch the wind to fly or trying to use a broken radio and spinning record to talk to an unconscious Max, it's a pre-technological, magical worldview. It's a difference in perception beautifully conveyed with the record player on the train. For Max, it's a machine that translates contours on a plastic disc to electrical currents that a speaker emits as sound. But to those kids, the nearly divine figure of Captain Walker touched it and a voice came through telling them they were going home.
I'm going home.
I'm going home.
After some additional pursuit-related encounters,
Anybody moves, and the dead mate!
Max clears the way for the others to escape in that Transavia from earlier. They fly to Sydney, which is somehow no longer coastal, and the tribe makes it their new home, remembering Max as a mythic hero figure that delivered them after all. It says a lot that Auntie lets him live. She's a pragmatic politician. She would chase him to the ends of the earth while she could still get what she wanted, but once the little old man is carried off in the air truck, there was no reason. He's no longer an enemy, he's just a man that did what he needed to do. She's taken a loss, but killing him does nothing to recoup that loss. The whole little war was, like everything else in Bartertown, a business arrangement. Sometimes you just have to cut your losses, and there's no sense being mad about it.
Ain't we a pair? Raggedy Man.
And Max slips back into the wasteland, wandering until chance makes him part of someone else's story again, arriving in a time of need to reluctantly help the downtrodden before fading away again, like Doctor Who with a shotgun. It's his role to intervene on the side of good, then become a memory. If Max became part of a community, if he settled, if he made a new life and was happy, he'd cease to be Max. And I liked Fury Road well enough, but I'd really like to see another Mad Max movie more like Thunderdome, with Mel Gibson playing an old Moses-like figure, leading people to salvation one last time, but not making it into the promised land himself. Captain Walker led a band of intrepid survivors to capture an airliner and thousands of gallons of jet fuel from a strangely unlooted airport in a Road Warrior world, hoping to fly off to Japan or whatever.